In this video, we're going to show you how to replace a front driver's side axle on your Ford Expedition. Using a 22mm socket, remove the 6 lug nuts. I'm going to thread on 1 lug nut so when I hit the back of the tire it doesn't just fall off the hub. Remove the lug nut and remove the wheel. Using a pair of pliers, we're going to remove the little axle cap. Using a 13mm socket, remove the axle nut. Using an 8mm socket, remove the bolt for the ABS wire stay. Using a 10mm socket, remove the bolt for the vacuum line and brake line bracket. Remove the ABS wire out of the plastic bracket. Using a trim tool, we're going to pull it out of the body mount right here. Pull the vacuum line off of the locking hub. On the back of here, these white 2 clips, go ahead and pull them out of the inner fender liner, and that's going to be the connector for our ABS wire. There's a little push button right here. Push on that. And pull down and remove the connector. Using a 21mm socket, we're going to remove the caliper bracket bolts. Remove the bolt. And we're going to pull the caliper off of the rotor. I have a hook hanging on the upper control arm. We're going to use that to support the caliper so there's no weight hanging on the brake hose. Remove the rotor. Remove the cotter pin, just using a pair of wire cutters. Using a 19mm socket, we're going to remove the upper control arm nut. To separate the upper control arm for the knuckle, if it does not separate by itself, you're just going to want to tap here with a hammer. You'll want to leave this nut threaded on just a few threads so that when this does let go, the knuckle does not fall towards you. We're going to remove the nut off of the ball joint. We're going to let the arm travel up, and we're going to pull the knuckle forward. Make sure your ABS wire has plenty of play before you start pulling. You do not want to stretch this wire. Using a 30mm socket on the nut side, and the head of this bolt is a 27. We're going to hold the head of the bolt while taking off the nut. Remove the strut bolt. Using an 18mm wrench, we're going to hold the sway bar link still. We'll use an 18mm socket to remove the nut. Push the axle in as we pull the knuckle forward. Now we're going to push the axle back, and it's a tight squeeze, but you can get it out of the hub. Using a large pry bar, we're going to pull down on our lower control arm. While you're doing this, make sure that the axle does not get bound up on the vacuum hub. Pull the sway bar link down far enough to be able to move it out of the way. Using a large pry bar, we're going to get right behind the axle. I'm going to use this point as our pry point. I'm going to give one swift pull and pop the axle out of the differential. We're going to pull our shock out into the side, and then you may have to give it a slight pull straight out. And then we can remove the axle. Line the splines up, and then on the end, you're going to take it and you're going to push in. If you don't feel it click into place, you can take a rubber mallet and hit the end and fully seat the axle. Install the axle into the hub. We're going to pull the shock to the side. And get it back to where it should be. We're also going to make sure that the sway bar link is lined up with the hole. And we can push up. We're going to put our sway bar link nut on a few threads. We're going to push up on the knuckle. Then we're going to line up the shock and put the bolt through. And we can put the nut on a few threads. Install the axle nut. We're going to torque the axle nut to 20 foot-pounds. Once you're done tightening down the axle nut, it's very important that you want to make sure when the hub spins, the axle does as well. We're going to snug down the sway bar link nut. Torque the sway bar link nut to 60 foot-pounds. Snug down the nut for the strut bolt. Torque the lower shock bolt nut to 406 foot-pounds. If you don't have a torque wrench, do the best you can. You're going to tighten down the nut for the upper control arm. Torque this nut to 111 foot-pounds. While you're tightening this, you want to make sure that you are actually torquing the nut and that the stud is not moving inside. Once it's torqued, you can go up to an additional 60 degrees so that you can fit a cotter pin through the slot in the nut and the hole in the stud. Install a cotter pin. We're going to bend it around. Install the rotor. We're going to thread on one lug nut to hold the rotor in place while we put the caliper bracket back on. Remove the caliper off of the hook. Snug the bolts down. Torque the caliper bracket bolts to 180 foot-pounds. You got a hook holding your caliper. Go ahead and remove that now. Install the vacuum hose onto the hub. Put the bracket in place and get your bolt started. We're going to pull our ABS sensor over and get that bolt started as well. Snug down the bolts. Put the ABS into the plastic bracket. We're going to work it up. Put the harness clips, one right here. This is going to go under the metal brake line. We'll install this one just here. Connect the ABS sensor. Push until you hear a click. If you don't hear a click, give it a pull. Make sure it's secure. And we can put that back into the inner fender liner. If you thread it on a lug nut, you can remove that now. Install the cap. Install the wheel and get the lug nuts started. Snug down the lug nuts. Torque the lug nuts to 150 foot-pounds in a star pattern.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.